already have a job. Alright, so you guys can tune this out because you already have a job. So the rest of you guys need to have a resume. So I guess there was the career fair was today?
Yeah.
That's correct. And then there was something else called Resumania. Just kind of cool term. Was that today also, or was that?
That was this week.
Last week. Okay, so you guys all have really good resumes, and you don't really need what I'm going to say. But But as Bethany said, my name is Brian Hoover. This is my second year being an advisor with the water group, and mostly I have been with the testing group. And this idea actually came about from Bethany last year. It was in the spring. We didn't have time to pull it together, but she had asked if I would consider doing something where I would share about my experiences of interviewing people or things that I saw on resumes, to try to share that with you guys as maybe some tips or examples that you could use on your own resume. So that's where this came about. And as she said, I am a project manager at Stantec Consulting. We are about a 13,000 person company that covers pretty much all of North America and some strange cities across the continents as well. But one of my roles there is I'm a senior project engineer, but then I'm also the transportation program manager. So part of that is I get to read lots of resumes, and I get to interview people and ask them all the hard questions about things that are on their resumes. So as Bethany said, part of this is selling yourself. I wouldn't say that I refer to it that way, but it's really about presenting yourself. And then the other thing is about getting the door to open, because really that's what your resume is about. Now my company, we don't actually accept just a blind resume. There has to be a job posting that is on our website. You have to respond to that. So it's a little more difficult in a company our size. But a lot of other companies will still just accept a regular resume. So this is really your means of presenting yourself and getting somebody to call back to you and give you an opportunity to come in. So I don't have any engineering jokes because engineers aren't really that funny. You know, we're considered boring people who collect slide rules and weird things like that. I only have one slide rule though, as a gift. But so I will tell you a funny story though. So one day I went in to get some coffee, and while I was waiting for my coffee to come out, the guy behind the counter was doing some small chat with me, and he asked me what I did. So I told him I was an engineer. And then he said, well, what's it like to drive those big trains? Well, then I had to politely explain I wasn't that type of engineer. But two things I'd like to talk with you guys about. One thing is how the Collaboratory in particular is on your resume. And then the other thing is when you're actually at an interview, how you would get to describe the Collaboratory. Because I'm sure if you guys had your resume, you don't have some big paragraph explaining what the Collaboratory is and what it does. It's probably more like it's a company that you would have worked for, like an internship. And you may say something about the Collaboratory for applied research. And then you start to talk about things that you do on there. So what types of things would you guys list under the Collaboratory if it is on your resume, which I'm sure it is on all of you. So go ahead and shout something out. What would you put on your resume for the Collaboratory? Everybody's shy. Oh, is your hand up?
Solid work experience.
Excellent. A specific example of a software program that is being used by you. What other things might you put on there?
Gave project presentation.
That's a really good one. Giving project presentations. Standing up in front of a bunch of people who are staring at you, making you nervous, is hard. So that is something very useful to put on your resume. What else is out there?
I have one doing documentation.
Excellent example. You guys are great. See, just keep throwing them out. Documentation. Everybody here is probably some type of engineering or science degree. So have you had a technical writing class yet? Something? Okay. You're going to do lots of technical writing. I saw somebody shake their head no. You will do lots of technical writing as an engineer or scientist because somebody's got to wrap up whatever it is you're doing and explain it to other people. So what other things might you guys do? How about on the
Design and modification.
of the project that you're working on? How about from a project management standpoint, those of you who are group leaders or team leaders? What tool are you supposed to be using as a leader? Somebody said Teamwork PM, exactly. So what goes on in Teamwork PM? SMART goals.
Time estimating.
Time estimating.
Task delegation.
Task delegation. Cool. These are all good buzzwords essentially for project management. You are coming up with a plan. You're setting about how you're going to work that plan, and you're assigning that plan to different people and holding yourselves accountable through goals. So all these things that you guys just described sound like what I do most of the days that I'm at work. And that's one of the things I wanted to stress to you is that what you guys are doing in the Collaboratory is so much like the real world. Not that this isn't the real world, but when you're working on a job, unless maybe you're sitting in a lab and working by yourself doing research for that moment, you're usually part of a team. And therefore, there are things like this that are going on. And your experience in the Collaboratory, being that it is stretched out over a semester, and then a lot of times it's continued from year to year, is so much like the real world. And the groups that I get to work with, really with the water testing and some of the BWAS, that was one of the things that really struck me about the Collaboratory. There's so much that you guys do here that is just like a regular job, where you are working with other people when somebody may not get their assignment done, and that kind of lets the team down. So how do you handle that as the group leader? There are also the triumphs that you have and the successes that you get to celebrate together. So how do you reward your group as the team leader? Or how are you a person who's seeking to be the servant leader maybe in the group? Which I wish I could have heard the whole thing tonight. I only caught the tail end of it. But these are the types of things that the Collaboratory gives you guys an opportunity to experience. And potentially 4 years, how many of you guys are freshmen? You guys. So potentially you'll get to do this for 4 years of your academic career and be able to gain this type of experience to be able to put on your resume. Anybody know what technical jargon is? Are you supposed to use it or avoid it?
Depends on what you're writing.
Exactly. It depends on what you're writing. So most of the time people say don't use technical jargon because people won't understand what you're talking about. But on your resume should use the technical jargon of the industry that you're in. This is something that I actually see a lot from people's resumes, and it somewhat clues me into maybe their lack of understanding of what they were doing. Because they may have had 3 years of an internship at a company that does the same work that I do, but the manner in which they describe it doesn't really fit with what I would say that it is, which makes me somewhat think that they may not know what exactly they were doing, or the part that they had in it. So your technical jargon is something you want to get down. How many of you guys have had an internship? Have any of you ever given your resume to the people who supervise you? I would suggest that that's one of the things that you guys do. Give your resume to the people who oversaw the work that you do and let them comment on the way that you describe it. Ask them in particular, are you using the right types of phrases that would describe the work that you were doing? And then another thing was to emphasize soft skills. So these are really the softer, gentler side of being in a group dynamic. These are not your technical things. So it's kind of some of the things that we talked about with the group dynamics. It's the things that you learn about how to interact with somebody else. These are things that you may be able to touch on in your resume, especially from a communication standpoint if you are a group leader or a team leader. But if you get the opportunity to have an interview, this is the type of thing that you could talk about. So let's say the magic moment comes and somebody says, okay, I'm going to talk to you, and you get to go in and you have your suit and tie on. And yes, you should still wear a suit and tie or dress for the ladies. Personal preference there. I would say outdress the people you're going to interview with. Because otherwise, if you show up in something flashy and really trendy, it is perceived as sort of lack of respect for what you're there to do. And we've had some people show up in some pretty colorful outfits that it was like, oh, I bet that's pretty cool somewhere else, but it really just doesn't fit in the business world. So let's say, all right, you're in there, you've got your resume, and your resume is now your stepping stone for the things that you have done. And again, focusing on the Collaboratory. What types of things might you describe if you were to describe the Collaboratory? So this is a big question. This is something I'd like you guys to do. Probably look to the, I guess it's probably about 3 at each table. Just at each table, let's take about 3 minutes, and each of you give some type of phrase or some words that would describe what the Collaboratory is just amongst each other. So we'll just take a few minutes for you guys to talk about that. Describe the collaboratory, what you think it is. Is there anybody who's willing to share how somebody described the collaboratory to you?
Sure.
There we go, a brave soul.
Someone decided to tell me this is basically where like you can use like your major and apply it in real life situations, like do it to help. I guess like combine the academics with like, actual work and like help out people while you're at it.
Great. That's a good description. Anybody else want to share something? Even if it's a single word or a thought. This is interactive. Go ahead.
Tony describes it as an engineering firm.
An engineering firm. That's
With being
cold
the
and
sign.
dry. Here's your slide ruler.
Only if you're applying to an engineering job.
Uh-huh.
I would mention that it's student-led and a volunteer organization.
That's great.
Customer driven.
That's really good. How many of you could name who your client is for your project? Don't stick your hand up. Fortunately, there's only people in the back. So slide it. You guys should all be able to name who your client is, because the projects that you're working on involve real people and real dollars. Somebody has given grant money for you to do what you're doing. And to go back to an example that Tony gave, it's okay to mess up, to put a hole in a wrong piece of a machine, and then that thing goes back to the scrap pile. But that costs money. So one of the key things that you guys have about the collaboratory is there are clients. And then another huge thing about it is that it is student-led. I don't know of any other organization that's like this. I'm a Penn State graduate, and to the best of my knowledge when I was there wasn't anything like this. So to me, one of the things that drew me to the collaboratory was some of these unique aspects of it. And then the other side of it was helping people, was a big piece of what it is. And that's why, like tonight with the servant leadership, was very huge, because you get an opportunity to put that into action. So in case you were lacking for something to describe the collaboratory as, this is what's on the collaboratory's website. So we could all read it here, but there are key words in here with hope and transforming lives through service in the areas of our academic disciplines. So you're getting to use the things that you're learning in class under the great tutelage of professors like Dr. Vader. And you're going to get to apply that on projects where you're helping people. Because all the projects that are in here have some direct need that they're serving. Which, one of the things that I do enjoy about civil engineering, which is the field that I'm in, and I do transportation design, so highway engineering, is most projects that we do are driven by some component of safety. That something either doesn't meet the speed that it needs to travel at, or there's some aspect like that too. So to me, I feel like the things that I do are actually making a difference, and I get to help people through that. Some of the other things that are in here that the collaboratory gives is a desire to share the gospel of Christ, which may not fly so well in some of the science-based places that you interview, but at the same time, this is something that's very huge, because this is really a piece that shapes some of why you do what you do, which really is another question you'd want to ask yourself. Why are you in the collaboratory? I don't think most of you guys are here for credit. I do think that this is volunteer, and maybe you get some credit out of it, but a lot of this is volunteer-oriented, so that's going to speak to who you are as a person and the types of things that would drive you. And as a person who is trying to sift through 20 different resumes for a single position, those types of characteristics that tell me about who you are and the things that you do speak a lot more to me before you even step into the room. And then when you get to describe what the collaboratory is, those are the types of things that to me would set you apart. And I would think to other employers they would as well, because it's really not about you. It's really about what you're doing on your team and what your project is seeking to do. And then some of these, now these are kind of big. I mean, I think if you walked in and said you were here to empower the world and bring peace, and that might seem a little far-fetched, but really this is at the heart of what the collaboratory is. So this is why I wanted to pull this up. If you're lacking for a way to describe it, go to the collaboratory webpage. And there's probably a lot of other cool things on the collaboratory wiki as well. And then another one, which, oh yeah, I did read it up here, was to transform lives. which reminds me of Romans 12, because that's what we should be about as Christians. This will be my little preachy part to you. But as Christians, it's something that should set us apart, that we should look different from the rest of the world because we should be transformed. We're in it, but we're not of it. And the Collaboratory gives you that opportunity to transform the lives of others through the things that you are doing here. So one big piece I want to end with, and then you can ask all sorts of questions, is to encourage you guys about what you're doing here, that the projects that you're working on are making a difference in the lives of somebody. And a lot of times it's probably in the lives of some small kids who really don't have access to things the way that we do. So I would applaud you all for being here and giving the time that you give. So that's all I have to share. Hopefully that may help you, how you shape the Collaboratory in your resume. And then for those of you guys who are seniors, especially when you're looking for a permanent job, but I'm sure all of you guys are looking to do internships. And a lot of these things are going to come about too, because not every company needs 20 interns. You may only need one, and you get a ton of resumes. So does anybody have any questions?
What do you think a common question would be in the interview regarding what they would see on your resume about the Collaboratory? If you were looking at a resume that had the Collaboratory described very well, described what you did very well, what would you ask?
Your resume is probably not going to describe the Collaboratory that much. And I actually do have one person's resume. Bethany sent it over. The person asked if I would look at it, which was really nice. And their resume was really good, but you really don't get the opportunity to say what the Collaboratory is, because your resume probably looks like a lot of others where it's a line item and then it's a bulleted list or something of the things that you did or the types of things that you're doing. So really it's your chance when you're in the interview. And the thing to me would be when I find out that it's a volunteer thing, then I would want to know, well, why do you do that? Because you're giving of your own personal time, and that gives you a place to talk about who you are, and hopefully that sets you apart from the technical skills that might be the same as others and just as good. And that was not an audience plan question, even though that was happening. So, are there any other questions?
So the resume itself does not indicate that it's a volunteer organization.
My guess is it probably wouldn't. It may depend on how much space you have on your resume, and maybe if it's maybe one of your first work experiences, and I would call this a work experience, you might have a little more room to elaborate on it and say, here's what the Collaboratory, give the Collaboratory name, and then a brief description about what it is, that it's a student-led volunteer organization and we're doing projects to do whatever. So you may get to make a statement about that. Most companies, I don't think you're going to get an opportunity to make that type of statement. I mean, if I describe Stantec, I would say we are one of thousands of engineering companies who do what everybody else does. We all do engineering. But the Collaboratory gives you a unique opportunity to describe something about what you do, and then also really say the why behind why you do it. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, you mentioned support, but what would my job title as a member of the Collaboratory be? Like my title on a resume? I was what at the Collaboratory?
That's a great question. It depends on how you might format your resume too. And again, I'm not a resume guy. But a lot of times, I know when I had done resumes, it would list my title, and then it would explain things that I did, or if I had multiple titles at a company, times of those things. Definitely, if you are a group leader, you should be listing that, and then you can explain things about what you did as a group leader. If you are a team member, that is an absolutely adequate title, because usually you need a whole lot more team members than you do leaders. So describe the things that you were doing as a team leader. Describe the things that you were responsible for. If you were the person who was testing something, or what your research was, or what you wrote about, explain what your responsibilities are. And that's really more key than the title. It's what you do. Any other questions?
I just wanted to mention that this has been great because it's made me realize we have a very tight paragraph that has more of those key words that would resonate with employers than that. And so if anyone wants that to help build your resume, I can send it to you easily, and I'll see if we can't get it to be a little easier to find on the website.
This is good because it's short and concise, but there's a lot packed into those few sentences. So, but it is good. It really wraps up the collaborative. A little tiny nutshell. So, last call for questions.
So Brian, if people think of questions later, that you're open to people coming and talking to you about
Oh, sure.
how they should word things or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say if you want to send your resume to me, I will gladly take a look at it. Bethany has my email address, which is probably the easiest way to get out there. It's probably somewhere on some work group in Teamwork PM. But I would definitely look at those, and if you do have other questions, you could email those to me as well. I'd be happy to answer them. And the other thing I'd say is, I mean, look around. There are other advisors in here as well. These are people who are out there working as well. Get their input and see what they may say too, because we're here to serve you guys. Okay, thank you.